You can see my. Could you see my screen? It says loading right now, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So this is the reimagination project for the Smallpox Memorial Hospital, with myself, Gilver Bueno, Maya Ortiz, and Joshua Nunez. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about the history, demographics, site analysis, plans and elevation, and our concept design and mood board. So to start off, we'll start with the history. So in the beginning, this hospital was first built in 1854, and it was primarily for smallpox victims. Around this time, smallpox was starting up, and so it was a hospital dedicated solely to smallpox victims. Eventually, 20 years later, it turned into Riverside Hospital, and then converted into nursing school around 1886 until 1950s. So here's the timeline from 1828 to present time. So some important things that here we'll see here are from the virus rising, spreading, and killing 25 out of every 1,000 people. In 1856 is when the hospital opened on December 18th, and in 1886 the hospital turned into a nursing school. Another important part, 1972, the structure was marked as a national landmark on March 16th. Then in 1973, what we know it as Roosevelt Island, where Smallpox Hospital is located at, and eventually became a NYC landmark on March 23rd of 1976. And currently, 2019, Friends of the Ruin is raising funds and advocating for restoration, and our RIOC, which is Roosevelt Island Operation Corps, is continues funds to stabilize the ruins of the structure. So these are just some pictures from during each of their phase, and you can see the difference from the beginning of the hospital and how it looks now. So the demographics of the people in Roosevelt Island, majority 45.8 are white, 19.7 Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, other races. You can see in this pie chart. So tourism throughout Roosevelt Island. So RIOC estimates that about 2.6 to 2.7 million people ride the tram each year, and they say that about 30% of those riders are tourists. So we see that majority of the people who come into Roosevelt Island are, in fact, residents, but 30% do come to Roosevelt Island that are tourists, and one of the largest tourist attractions is the hospital itself. So, Josh, where? All right. This is a sky view of Roosevelt Island. So you can see how it's located on the southernmost tip of the island. To the south is the Human Rights Memorial, Four Freedoms Park, and to the north is Cornell Technician Sciences and Technology Campus. So smallpox is in the middle of the United Nations and the World Health Organization buildings across the water. The location is easily accessible between ferry, tram, subway, and car, which we'll get into more later. Oh, actually, right now. So site analysis. So we talked about distances here. Joshua is going to elaborate.
Hello, I'm Joshua. Here are the distances from the hospital to important transportation lines. The distance from the hospital to the NYC ferry is a 9-minute walk, as well as the distance from the hospital to the tramway, which is also a 9-minute walk. The distance from the hospital to the nearest train station is a 12-minute walk, while walking from the other side of the bridge would be a 20-minute walk or a 9-minute drive. Next slide. As you can see here, we got these images off of Google Earth. These are the surrounding views around the Smallpox Memorial Hospital, which shows all the beautiful scenery and nature surrounding the hospital. These are some of the views you will see while walking around the hospital. Here we show pictures of the existing conditions of the Smallpox Memorial Hospital, which we got from Google Images. The existing conditions play a large part in the atmosphere the hospital has, which is something we want to make sure the hospital keeps when reimagining it, so the community doesn't lose its connection to the historic building.
All right, so here in this slide, you'll see the zoning, sunlight path, and boundaries. So this zoning is R72 zoning area, which is residential. So in this because of the zoning, this is mainly a zoning area for residential houses, but as well as for more of community-wide things like schools, doctors, and community centers, which we'll also elaborate on that later. And then sunlight path and boundaries, Gilbert will speak more on this.
Hello, I'm Gilver, so I'll be taking over from here. For sunlight path, the sunrise, the sun rises around 8 a.m. In the east and sets around 6 p.m. completely in the west. So for here, you would see from right to left that the sun would not be blocked by the building. Drivers or pedestrians, anyone walking by would not be affected or would not be at risk. And then for um, violations and or boundaries, you can see that our building here is a permit is needed to make any changes, but for the landmark itself, anything can be built on top of it, as long as we do have some form of team or staff that will maintain the grounds and the building itself. Next slide, please. Next, I will be discussing the concepts and our mood board. So, some of our original concepts consisted of restoring the hospital and the school aspect, as far as offering classes for first aid, something many people don't really know, or many isn't very common knowledge among residents and people in general. Stabilizing the area for park and public use, creating a community park was something else that we thought about doing, which isn't really in our plans as of now. A community park completely, at least. Another idea that we had was having art displays or exhibits. Having a place that the group could, having a place that the residents could display artwork or anyone in general, where it all can be appreciated. And then our final idea at the time was building an active museum, which combined with the hospital and art display is where we would have led on to. Another thought that we all had was having multiple uses, which we will elaborate further on in a minute. But as of now, we thought that having a hospital plus a museum with a layer for each of them, as far as the building goes, would have been a great idea. So that way we would have multiple uses for the same area. Art display plus a museum. An example of what we had in mind was the Met Museum here in New York. Next slide, please. So for our architectural precedent, the Fahel House in Tallinn, Estonia, was an area that we took a lot of inspiration from, mainly for the tower that sits on the east side of the entire building itself. The tower originally was constructed in 1926 and is currently used for apartment spacing, but a second layer was built on top of it and finished in 2007, and that is mainly used for office spaces. As far as we figured, having a two-layer area or a two-layer building as such would have been a great idea for ours, because that way we could build on top of it and have two different uses for the Smallpox Memorial. Having two different uses would have made a lot of improvement, because that way we could keep the museum aspect below in the original building, and on top we could have something that would benefit the community as best as we could. Something we wouldn't be using is obviously the height, because we wouldn't want to build that high, especially in such an area that the sunlight would not be affected as much. And the fact that the uses for the Fahel House are mainly expensive and residential for apartments and everything. We want something that the entire community can use. Next slide, please. And that's just an image of the Fahel House.
Yeah. So this architectural precedent study focused the revitalization of Birdseye Historic Center. This is located in Palestine, and one thing that really stood out was the fact that they used the same materials, which I don't know if you noticed in one of the prior photos. There's a bunch of bricks in the back and the south end of the hospital, and we would like to incorporate those materials into building our new design. They transformed the city into something beautiful for the entire community. It's a community center now, and it even created jobs for people, and it revived vanishing tradition crafts in the process. This was designed from 2017 to 2011 by Rywalk, and it also received an award. This is a site plan just to further see how they built it. You can see the surgery center, main entrance, and much more.
So, like the architectural precedent recently showed of the historical revitalization, we hope for our final idea was to create a community center that the entire community can enjoy and take part in multiple and diverse activities. We hope that we can keep the history throughout the building in ways of art or showing tools that were used from the past, something that the community can know belongs to them, but is also belonging to a piece of history. Next slide, please. Here are some ideas for the mood board. Here are some ideas for the building itself, some concepts that we hope can represent what the building will look like. You can see the 2 layers for certain buildings, some art, museum off to the right. That's an area that the entire community can enjoy, will look beautiful, add on to the scenery that already surrounds the memorial, and can overall be enjoyed by everyone involved. Next slide.
Plans and elevations.
Our plan is to really engage communities in the design concept and function of the new building, as well as give the project a bigger voice. We also want to make sure to keep the area very open so it does not lose its original feeling, and like Gilver said, keep the history the building comes with. These images both show the top and the side view of the hospital, as well as the measurements taken in order to put the restoration into perspective. This is very important when integrating all our ideas and all our ideas of the buildings.
So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?